Hello, everyone. This is Brian Richesson, editor of LP Gas Magazine. I'd like to introduce to you Michael Baker. He's the Director of Legislative Affairs for the National Propane Gas Association. We caught up with Michael recently to talk legislative issues. June's always the month when we go to Washington, D.C. for Propane Days, the industry's annual lobbying event. Obviously, with COVID-19, that didn't happen this year. So we brought Michael in here, have him on the line to discuss some legislative issues for the industry. And he also offered some tips for propane marketers.
But the content of the calls is fantastic. And I think one of the things that I really wanted to showcase, Brian, was that our legislative team has worked really hard to develop new relationships and strong relationships in key parts of the legislative body that will allow us to have a voice when major pieces of legislation come up. And, we talked with folks from the Energy and Commerce Committee, the Transportation and Infrastructure Committee, Homeland Security Committee. And so all these have kind of repercussions for us. And so I think additionally, one of the things we really wanted to show is asking similar questions to legislators who are Democrats, who are Republicans, and who are from different parts of the country, and hear how they respond to those questions differently. And I think we really did hear different answers from everybody. And that's one of the things that I wanted to show is that, so often when we want our news, we tune into Fox News or we turn into MSNBC or CNN or whatever it is, whatever news makes us feel most comfortable receiving that message. And we kind of take that as gospel. And I think the reality is there's a lot of people who we don't know their names. We don't know what they do. And they're doing the real work. They're the boots on the ground in Congress who are working so hard. And I think if the calls showed anything, I think it shows that our voice is being heard. So to that extent, I think the calls were a success.
So if you were in, if we were together in the large ballroom, talking, kind of getting the industry ready to go up on the Hill, and just like the update that you give every year, what would that look like this year? What would you say to the industry?
It's kind of a difficult question because a lot of the priorities that we've been advocating for have changed, and they haven't changed in that we don't care about things like, it's not to say that we don't care about things like the Drive Safe Act or the Jones Act or any of these other things that we've been advocating for a long period of time, but just the nature of this crisis and how it has impacted our ability to advocate for issues and how Congress itself has not really returned to business as usual. So we can't really, it would be a little bit different. And I think some of the biggest things that we would be talking about are lie heap issues that weren't at the forefront in previous years. And, as unemployment numbers last week, kind of the jobs report came back and it was a little bit favorable, which is good. We're glad to see that. But I think our industry has some pretty severe concerns about our customers being able to pay their bills. And the LIHEAP program is essential in making sure that program is adequately funded through the appropriations process. And so we've laid a lot of the groundwork over the appropriation season, which is really the first quarter of the calendar year. And we definitely advocated for adequate funding for the program. And we work with other stakeholders on that, like the American Gas Association, the American Public Gas Association, and some others. And so we're hopeful that as we move into the heating season, as the fall season comes around, that the program is adequately funded. So that would be another big thing. The second biggest thing that we have on the table right now, everyone's talking about transportation. It's transportation. And so, last year we talked about the issue about the Clean Corridors program and some new additions to that program that would create grant funding opportunities for refueling infrastructure. And propane was left out of those opportunities. And one of the biggest things that we've tried to do is ensure that, number one, the government's not picking winners and losers in the transportation market. And number two, that all fuels that are designated under the original Clean Corridors program, so that's electric, hydrogen, natural gas, and propane, that all four of those fuels are eligible for grant funding opportunities for refueling infrastructure. And we believe that partnership of public investment and private investment is a way that we can build out a national infrastructure through the Corridors program and get more propane vehicles on the road. So those would be the two biggest things right now. That if I was up there right now, or if I was going up there on Tuesday, that's what I would talk about.
That's great. Obviously, so much talk is around COVID-19 as well. How much of your time right now is being spent on issues related to COVID-19?
So we've actually just seen a transition, and for the first couple months, let's just say mid-March is the start of that for us. That's when I didn't return back to the office, and most of my colleagues didn't as well. And the DC itself kind of shut down for business. From then until about a couple weeks ago, it's kind of murky waters in how we could go up to the Hill to ask for things like transportation issues, tax issues that we're working on. Our normal everyday advocacy was kind of off the table, and it was all about COVID-19. How do we get our people back to work? How do we ensure essential industries like the propane industry, that their frontline workers are safe? How do we make sure that our businesses are protected, from the liability of having to enter these homes? So thankfully, over the past couple weeks, there's been a big transition, and things like transportation are now the priority. And they look at a major transportation bill as a relief package itself, and as a way to get Americans back to work and to kind of bolster the economy. And so we have those fights that I mentioned earlier, ensuring that propane is eligible for grant funding opportunities for refueling infrastructure, making sure that we're there and we're eligible for those things. We have some other items in there, some hazmat stuff that we also care about, and now we're back to that advocacy, and we're talking with staff every single day, all day. So it's been good. I feel the past couple of weeks have been very busy with these congressional calls and making sure that that's set up, and also managing the board meeting, which is coming up, which about. And then now we're back to transportation. There's going to be a markup in committee next Wednesday, and so the timeline to work with the committee and members of the committee to get amendments included as a part of the markup process, that is well underway, and we've selected some legislators to go after. So yeah, it's been busy, and this has been a week of kind of returning to action for us, and actually focusing on things that are kind of outside the scope of COVID-19.
That's a great lead into the next question, but just in Congressman Schrader mentioned this yesterday, but what do you say our industry can do to make those connections, maybe with their own representatives, their own congressional leaders, others in the community that can really make a difference?
Yeah, I think you were here last year at Propane Days when I stood up in front of everybody, and I told them that the Advocacy Day, Propane Days on Capitol Hill, is one of the most important tools that we have as an association to carry out our advocacy work, because that bridges the gap between me as a lobbyist, whose job it is to make those connections with legislators and their staff, and constituents and small businesses across America. And so when we have those folks go up and advocate for these issues on Capitol Hill, it's so important. And so now that we're in a different situation, Propane Days is canceled, we have to change the way that we approach that. And we've alluded to it a couple times in NPGA reports, but the next phase of kind of this replacement for Propane Days will be a program that will really push our members to get out and host meetings either at their local propane facilities or going to district or state offices for these legislators and meeting with them in person. And I think again, the most important thing that we can do is get our members out, get them in front of legislative staff, get them in front of legislators, and talk about the issues that are impacting their business. And, very, very similar to Propane Days last year, making sure, and as part of this program we like to roll out for later this summer, early fall, is that we want to make sure that our guys are prepared. What are the issues? If I'm going to speak with a specific legislator, what do we talk with them about? And making sure that, if they let us know we're going to see a member like Kurt Schrader, it's like, well, he's on the Energy and Commerce Committee. Here's a list of priorities that we would like you to discuss with him. Here's some one-pagers that give you some background information. I think that we will hold some webinars as well to help prepare people in advance for that. But we have to mobilize our industry outside of Washington, D.C. to reach these federal legislators. And that's going to be our goal with this next program.
I know the elections came up in some of the webinars this week. What would you say, what's really at stake for the propane industry in this year's elections, whether, it's congressional or presidential?
The climate policies that are coming out from the progressive wing of the Democratic Party. And I think if we get a Democrat in the White House and we see the Senate flip, I think we can expect to face greater challenges, especially in the energy sector. But I don't want that to sound like we don't have a plan. I think that our association has done a great job about what role propane is going to play in a decarbonized economy and how we can fight back against things like electrification. Our industry has a fantastic story to tell, and I think that we have many different applications that can help reduce carbon emissions and greenhouse gases. And I think it's about getting in front of these legislators and helping and educating them about how we can play a successful role in the future of decarbonizing the economy.
Are there any other legislative items? I know you touched on some big ones. I know the Paycheck Protection Program had been top of mind there for a while. I guess anything else on the legislative front that the industry should know about?
Yeah, I think that the biggest thing right now is transportation. It's been kind of the theme of what we talked about on the call. I think over the past several years, Congress has moved to not pass a bunch of little pieces of legislation. They've focused on passing larger pieces of legislation. We had some tax stuff that was done previously, and now it's time to do some transportation work. So we are definitely in the middle of that discussion, and we're excited to hopefully get some favorable results. And if we're talking about some other things, we expect the appropriations process to return. And last year we were successful in getting some favorable report language on the appropriations side that ended up being signed into law that helped things like our combined heat and power projects and vehicle engine technology projects out of the Department of Energy. We've expanded those requests. And so as the committee process kind of returns to normal in this post-COVID world, we fully expect to get back into those arguments as well. And we've expanded our asks and tried to build on the success of last year. And we had some really good feedback from Congress as we were going around during appropriation season earlier this year. So those would be the two big things that we see before election season. I don't see any other major programs coming down the pipeline that are going to impact the industry before the end of the year.